And the next speaker we have is Debbie Sinclair, who is going to talk about the proposals that were given to the bargaining team.
Okay, so we all received this morning, I believe, an email from President Law, which gave us access or directed us to a website. And on there, President Law stated USF remains committed to bargaining in good faith to reach an agreement with UFF to provide faculty with pay and benefit increases. USF's current proposal to UFF consists of a 3-year agreement that's mostly unchanged from the last full CBA negotiated with the faculty union. And that would be, in other words, the 16-19 CBA. She then goes on to explain that they're offering us a 1.5% pool for base salary raises in the current, as soon as this contract's ratified, 2% the following year and 2% the year after, and that they'll expand tuition waivers. It all sounds really good. Except for what isn't she saying, right? So it was just released yesterday, I believe, U.S. inflation accelerated to 7.5% on an annual basis as of January 2022, a 40-year high. They're offering us 1.5%. Additionally, President Law admits that salary increases are contingent upon available funding. And she points out that this isn't the first time we've done that, right? Contingent salary provisions were in the last CBA, and they honor us for unavailable funds. So what doesn't she say? If you look at the 2017, 18, 19 contract, the contingency was that there'd be no reduction in the university's performance-based funding as compared with the performance-based funding from the prior year, 2016. This current proposal is a little bit different. In this case, our raises are contingent upon positive funding of the university's legislative budget request as compared to the level funding in the prior year, right? So 2021 too for that, so each year prior. And in the event the university's LBR is unfunded or insufficiently funded, the university shall have the sole discretion to determine whether to proceed. So you can see there's a bit of a difference. So what does that difference mean? An LBR contains 3 components. So in addition to the performance-based funding we had in the year prior as our contingency or the contract prior, we now also have some preeminence in national ranking payments and University of Distinction information. So it appears to me that we've gone from being, no decrease in performance-based funding to all of these things have to be funded. And because of that requirement that they be positively funded, it seems to me that they're basically saying that it has to be, if they ask for the money, and it's not all given, then it's not positively funded. Positive funding is usually an increase from last time. And it's at their discretion, basically, whether or not it's even funded enough for their contingency. So this seems like a lot more hoops. It's not the traditional contingent upon funding. What else doesn't she say? In the past, as Sonia mentioned, and Susie, bargaining was done on each individual proposal. And so we went through line by line like we just did, and we would talk about things that we were willing to give and we negotiated. In this contract, there's been no negotiation. The only way to get these raises is to accept the contract in its entirety, which means that we forego all of those things that we were trying to negotiate that Sonia covered, some of the most important. And we're going to have to accept a few things that they threw into this contract that we would have no control over negotiating. We just have to take them to get our raises. So the first thing, non-discrimination. In Article 6, Section 6.5, currently we have the right to grieve on behalf of any member who's been discriminated against based on race, color, sex, gender identity and expression, sexual orientation, religion, national origin, age, military status, disability, political affiliation, marriage status, or union activity. Their proposal would make it so that we could no longer grieve any complaint with respect to alleged violations of Title IX, which deals with sexual harassment. So what's the problem with that? Well, several things. First off, if we have an allegation of sexual harassment, and again, we would have been able to file a grievance for those, for example, discrimination based on sex. In this case now, that would prevent us from grieving, and they may have a conflict. For example, they may decide that it's embarrassing that we have a supervisor harassing a faculty member, an administrator, and therefore they can kind of sweep it under the rug. And there was recently a Harvard example where exactly that happened. They had 3 students complain about a professor. The professor was well known and very heavily funded, and they basically swept the whole thing under the rug for quite a while. And even when they resolved it, they didn't really resolve it. It also would prevent you from having union representation in any interviews conducted as part of a Title IX investigation. And if you went to mediation under the Title IX investigation, you would also not be able to have a union representative at that hearing. In addition to that, they've tried to add some wording in our annual performance evaluation. Basically, what we have now says that when the evaluator, when they're looking at your things, they're looking at materials. So they can look at your class notes, your syllabi, exams, assignments, whatever. And if you submit some kind of evaluation, say that you have a peer or an expert of some type come into your class and evaluate your teaching, then they're also required to consider that in addition to the student evaluations of teaching. The proposed change is that, I'm sorry, go back, Susie. They have added to the list of materials, and I added emphasis there because materials are pretty, objective things, right? I can look at how your syllabus is organized and how you're, make sure that you're covering everything. But they've added that the supervisor can take into account classroom observations and visitations. So what's the problem with that? The problem there is your supervisor may or may not be qualified to really evaluate teaching, and they could be biased. So now you don't have an opportunity to bring somebody in that of your choice at your discretion, or somebody who's an expert. You just have to give over to your supervisor, who may or may not be an expert in the field, like I said, and may or may not be biased. So it seems like a less objective way of looking at it, it's way more prone to bias and subjectivity. So
okay, thank you very much.
Feel that doesn't allow us to add anything that Sonia talked about, and forces us to accept all of this. That's it.
Steve, are you ready to take over?
Okay. We were, of course, interested in what our members thought about some of these bargained articles, and we did a survey. I'm not going to go through hundreds of comments and many, many questions, but I'm going to put some selected highlights on here that made a difference to the bargaining team. One of the questions, which was right up front, something's missing, but that's all right, I remember, so I can just talk from it. There's a slide that's missing before this one, but don't worry about it. The first question that we asked, and I don't know whether it's in these slides or not, but the first question that I asked was, what level of raise in a percent basis, 1%, 2%, 3%, 4%, 5%, would you be willing to vote to ratify if offered? And basically 3% of our faculty said 1%, and somewhere around 80 to 85% of the faculty said that they would like 3%, 4%, or 5% as a minimum to ratify it. That was one of the important findings that we got from our members on the survey. This was another question that we asked, which was, how did USF do? And remember, we had an MOU that dealt with COVID that expired when the Surgeon General did not declare an emergency. And we asked them, what do you think about USF's efforts? And I'm not getting into all the possible answers, and I'm not getting into all the comments, but we have around 31% who said USF doesn't go far enough to keep everybody safe. Another 28% who said USF efforts are inadequate, and another 8% who said USF's efforts are dismal. I am thinking of leaving USF because of the working conditions are unsafe. So when you start putting this together, you're looking at somewhere around 60 or 65% of our faculty felt like the university's reaction to the virus safety was inadequate and not up to par. So that was another general finding that we found. All right, let's go to the next one. There's the one I was looking for a minute ago. It just got out of order. That's fine, no worries. That was what percent would you be willing to ratify? And, I think if you total them together, you can see that it'd be very unlikely for us to put forward a contract with, say, 1% or 1.5% and have our members vote for it. They're going to vote against it. This was the outside activity. Now, we're not going to, we could spend 2 hours on this today because we've got a number of really big grievances going on, but USF took a very, very aggressive stance about outside activity in response to a new legislative act that was written last year. And they put it onto a survey called eDisclose, which many or if not most of you have all filled out. And in this particular eDisclose, they've asked you to report things like any activities you have outside of work that are related to your area of expertise, which is vague and nobody knows what that is. Or they've gone on a hunt, it appears, for outside activities that you might not have reported but have no conflict at all with the university. And so some of our faculty have been reacting badly to this, and some have not run across it yet because it's new this last year or two. But we had 30% of our faculty say that the outside activity reporting is a dangerous step towards censorship by politicians. And we had another 28% who say that reporting outside activities are related to my area of expertise is none of USF's business. So again, we're well over 50% on this. And we do have a few people, about 15%, who still haven't run into this, but more and more faculty are balking at this survey that they're asking us to fill out. And then the last slide with the bars there, this was simply a ranking of 10 of the important ideas or concepts in our bargaining that were not necessarily in every article, but we were wondering how faculty thought about them. And by far and away, the highest peaked #1 rated area of interest that our faculty were concerned about was compression and inversion of salaries. And this has gone on for quite a while at USF. We have in our contract, in our current contract, in fact, last, I think 3 contracts or 4 contracts, something called ADI, Administrative Discretionary Increases. And if you look at the contract, it says the university can use these for compression, inversion, and equity concerns. Our university does not use them for those. And so we've gotten to a point where we have a lot of complaints about, as I said, equity and compression inversion, which is causing our faculty to rank it #1. Okay, if you'll go down to the next one. So what does this mean when you take the fact that they've given us a package proposal, which had some shaky language in it, which we find to be misleading, and you put that together with a lot of proposals that Sonia gave you, which they did not include in their package proposal and ignored, even ones that had nothing to do with money were left out of their package proposal, which is insane. I don't know why they wouldn't bargain something that had nothing to do with money. And then we also had a survey where a large number of our faculty, for one reason or another, would probably vote not to ratify it. And so I have come up with a list of some things, which some of these have already been mentioned, which we feel like are preventing our team from any possibility of recommending these package proposals to be put forward to the faculty for ratification. One of those is the salaries offered on contingency, which we do not agree with. Another is they have not used ADI, their administrative discretionary increase, to address compression or equity. If there was a formula to use for compression or equity, that would be a help, even if it wasn't enough to bring everybody up to some standard that we agreed with. They're not doing any of it. We also do not agree with the attempt to remove USF's ability to go and file a grievance and go to binding arbitration over sexual harassment. We spent several meetings with the Title IX coordinator, and they can do an investigation in Title IX. They can make a recommendation, but they have no authority to actually solve the problem, and they do not go to binding arbitration. And we don't like the idea that the union would not have representatives in such a case. We also noticed that there were some other things in the package proposal which haven't been mentioned yet. They put one thing in a package proposal, then they took it out. I don't know if they'll bring it back or not. When we have a layoff provision, we thought they were going to enact it last year during the virus, but they didn't. And it has categories of employees that are first, second, and third to be laid off. And this might be employees who are newer to the university and have been employed less than 5 years, and then employees who've been there longer than 5 years but not tenured, and then tenured employees. And so you would have to exhaust one category before you could move to the next one in layoffs. The university had proposed, and then they withdrew it. We don't know what they're going to do next time, that they could have a layoff category of anyone up to 10 years service. We did not like that at all. And then this whole thing about outside activity. We have an article on outside activity in the current contract. It says that if you have outside activity that conflicts with the university or is paid compensated activity that might take away from your job at the university, you're supposed to report that. We've had that for many years, and we've had very, very few issues with it. This new e-disclose thing that they're doing is vague, but it's also just oppressive. And we already have one faculty member who's been suspended without pay over somebody else putting their name on a website, even though they were not being paid for anything or doing any work outside the university. So it's just crazy. And then we have this issue of severability. We have asked to just drop that article or change that article several times. We consider severability to be a waiver. You can talk to Bob about, and we would like that taken out. So I'll just finish up then and say that as far as the team is concerned, we do not think that the package proposal or the proposals they're putting on the table now would be worthy to give to the faculty for a number of reasons besides salary. And so we're not putting them forward at this time.
Okay, thank you, Steve.